All right, we are live now. Hi, everyone, to our book club. Woohoo! Um, Joel is not able to join today, so I'm gonna get us started with just really brief introductions and then jumping into the book. My name's Eva Thanheiser, and I teach at Portland State University. Carolee, you want to go introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carolee Hurtado. I am a professor of math education at Cal State Channel Islands.
Do I go next? My name is Mayra Orozco. I am a teacher in Corona Norco Unified School District. I am a teacher on special assignment at the district level as an EL and Equity TSA.
And hi, Mark Ellis. I'm a faculty at Cal State Fullerton in Southern California in secondary education, and I focus on mathematics education.
Well, welcome and thank you for joining us to chat about the book. I think our focus today is the last two chapters, which really deal with family connections and then pulling everything together. So I was wondering, and I think, Mayra, you were showcased in those chapters somewhat. So
a couple of times, yeah.
I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit more about family connections, what that looks like, why that's important, those kinds of things.
I've always thought that families play a huge role in education, and bringing the families in is always a struggle or challenge, and depending on the populations you work with. And I know working in Anaheim when this book was written, the population there, majority of the population there is Hispanic, and we wanted to find a way to bring those families in without having it be like one-sided, right? Where the parents just come in and help with, minute tasks in the classroom. We wanted them to really be part of the learning experience. So in conjunction with Cal State Fullerton and the district office and Discovery Science Center, we built a lot of tasks where we brought parents in by interviewing them. The kids would be able to interview their parents as to how they use math on a daily basis. And with those videos, we were able to launch different math concepts or just juicy tasks for students to really dive into the mathematics and the problem solving using things that their parents do on a daily basis. So having those videos really made the families feel part of the learning experience, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and something that we wrote about in that chapter about working with families and in communities is that, as Mayra pointed out, it's not just family involvement. It's like, oh, here, do this task for us, help us out with making copies. It's family engagement, right? It's that bi-directional, reciprocal relationship that you want to develop, that's a mutual respect. And I think Mayra and her colleagues did such a great job of modeling that and putting that into practice in the community where they were teaching when we were writing the book. That's why it was just that chapter was actually, I think, one of our favorites. Not that we play favorites, but I think that was one of our favorites. Because we had so many good examples among the teachers that we were working with and who had invited us into their classrooms to really see what engagement this bi-directional, respectful relationship with parents and families really looks like.
And I feel like many times, when we assign math homework to the kids, those problems get sent home and the parents try to help the best way they can using the ways they learned to solve the mathematics. And sometimes those ways are not validated when the kids come back to the classroom with, oh, my parents taught me a different way of solving this problem. And many times, you know, we say like, oh, well, that's not how we're going to do it here. You know, this is how and so we don't validate those relationships that the kids are building at home through mathematics with their families. But having them, we had many family nights where the families would come in and we would pose a mathematical problem for them, and we would discuss the ways to solve this problem, and not only engage them in the problem solving as they knew how to solve the problem, but then discuss the ways that we're solving these problems in the classroom, and really have a conversation as to why the concrete models are so important for students to understand, and then lead them into the algorithmic models and the quick way of solving problems that the parents were teaching the kids, and giving them the parents the background, but also validating their ways is really important. I don't know.
So I have some follow-up questions. I was thinking, as I was reading, and also as both of you are talking about this bidirectionality, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what is it that you as a teacher gain from doing this, and why it's important to do it in both directions. And I'm assuming that you do this regularly every year, so it's not like a once or twice thing, so you kind of know what parents think like, but you kind of keep working with parents. So can you share a little bit more about that?
I don't know if you have anything on this, Mark, and then do you have anything?
Well, I can share what I observed working with you all. It's that we structured it so that there was a series of events with parents that were designed to be interactive, right? So it wasn't have parents come and listen to teachers talk at them for an hour. It was, have parents come and engage with them, learning together for an hour. Whether it's learning about their ways of thinking about mathematics, whether it's having them look at what the students might be doing in the classroom and having the students kind of take the lead. Having a faculty member, our colleague Armando Martinez Cruz came in from Cal State Fullerton's math department to talk with them about, his perspective from the college level, how this mathematics of 5th grade, right, is getting them ready for higher levels of mathematics, and sort of explaining some of the connections. So there was a variety of formats that were used. But it was definitely ongoing. It wasn't a one-time kind of thing. It was something that I think enriched the teachers, because they could then have a group of parents who understood why their child came home and talking about using manipulatives in the math classroom. Well, most parents, that wasn't their experience, right? So if they didn't know the rationale behind it and had not had the chance to experience it at these math nights, they might have sort of been a little confused or even skeptical as to how this connects.
I gained so much understanding. Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I gained so much understanding, parent perspective on how they're helping their kids and what it meant for parents to help their kids at home, because we were changing the format, right? This is not the norm. And so I gained perspective on what they felt were the cultural norms around, like, the place of school versus the place of a parent, and how those two things interact. So I gained a lot of perspective there. I also learned different ways of solving things that, I never knew the ways they were solving it. And so when we had that conversation, that dialogue, the same thing we do with our kids, right? When we're doing a mathematical discourse, when we're doing math talks and stuff like that, we're were talking through problems, that they were doing the same with us. Well, this is how I learned, and this is, and then we were understanding each other's ways. So I think it was a reciprocal learning experience.
My entry point into family and community engagement was getting a phone call from a teacher at a local school where the parents were asking for math workshops. So in year one, if you can imagine, we had 20 90-minute sessions with parents, and many of them came, to 18, 19, 20 of those workshops. And we really started to listen to the parents of what they wanted. And so teachers and administrators, we even had a counselor, would come together to think about, what is it that the community is interested in, and then how could we dream and envision and implement that together. Fast forward to years 4 and 5, those parents were leading the math and science workshops for the school, and we would easily have 400 people in attendance. So, we started to have parents who were, volunteering in classrooms during academic instruction, to be able to support their community. We had much greater communication between families and schools, and we really started to see parent leadership that might have been there already, but we hadn't seen that before. So I think it started to change who we seen as teachers, and who, is the source of knowledge and facilitation that we could bring to this goal of supporting our children's academic and math success.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Carolee to share this example. So it just sent chills up my neck when she was telling us several years ago now this story. But even hearing it again tonight, I'm sure it's going to do the same thing. When you were working with parents, it might have been the same district you were just mentioning, and there was some skepticism about how math was being taught, how students were asked to think about division in multiple ways, using different strategies. And one of the children of one of those parents in the group had come up with some interesting ways to show division, to show that she understood division. And so maybe I'll let Carolee, do you recognize that? Does that sound familiar?
I absolutely do.
Okay.
Shout out to Miss Holly. She was the teacher who I was working with. So this was a district close to the school that I was talking about, that when they started to move into Common Core, and I was doing professional development for their teachers across K-12, so focused on Common Core and cognitively guided instruction. Dr. Brett Geithman, who was the assistant superintendent at the time, he really noticed that we should be offering simultaneous parent workshops to understand what are these shifts and why are we engaged in those ways. So we had a ton of parent workshops over a few years, and we would co-facilitate them with teachers. So this particular parent workshop, we probably had about 40 to 50 parents in the district boardroom, and the teacher was leading the math lesson like she would with her students, and we were able to share some of the student work to show these different strategies for division. And we had lots of different engagement strategies for the parents. They had to get up, stand up, and find other people to share their strategies with. And in the beginning, some of the parents are like, why would we do this? This is slow. And then when we showed the student work, the parents were amazed, because this particular student had about 4 or 5 different strategies for how she knew the answer. And the parents went from, why would we do this, to, wow, this child must be gate. She's so, she's so amazingly gifted. And one of the parents in the room started to have tears in her eyes, because she didn't know, and we had used a fake name, but she knew that it was her daughter at that point. She had been considered struggling at the beginning of the year. So I think it really started to change the notion, CGI especially, of who can be successful in mathematics, but then also to engage parents in this kind of way, to see that there is a lot of mathematical understanding that we often overlook if we only focus on that one strategy. So, every time I think about that, I think this is why we do this kind of work, because it also helps to bring parents into understanding what we're doing, but also to see that these labels just might not be accurate. And we can start to see our parents and students for the brilliance that they have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one of the I guess one of my most favorite lessons that I did a couple of years ago, and I can't replicate it, and I'll tell you why. I was buying a house at the time, and I was moving, and I wanted to engage the kids in this conversation. And in Anaheim, I had done a lesson very similar to like, oh, if you could buy a house, would you buy this house? And the kids were really having a hard time with place value and understanding the millions and what that really meant in concrete, right? So I had them go on websites like Zillow and Realtor.com and all these websites and like look at home values. And at this new time that I did it in concrete, I was actually purchasing a house. So what I did was I said to my students, you guys are going to be my realtors. But in order for you to be my realtor, we have to interview a realtor because you don't know how to be realtors. So I brought in one of my students said, my mom's a realtor. Can we invite her? And I said, yes, let's invite her. And we wrote down questions for her. And, what are we going to ask? What do we need to know if, you're going to find me a house? Well, the kids figured out all the questions they wanted to ask this parent. The mom came in and she answered every question, like, okay, you need to make sure that you have the number of bedrooms, the location, that it's close to her work, that it's close to her husband's work, that it's this size and it has this amenities. And the kids were like taking notes. Well, after this whole experience, the parent was really excited that she was part of the lesson, like for the day. But after that, the kids really went on Zillow and they're like, oh, I don't know why you're looking here, Miss Orozco. They're like, the houses here are why are they so expensive? And we had this conversation about just areas and why areas are more expensive than others. And it became like a very rich learning experience. After that, they developed like a plan, like, okay, we're going to sell you this house. So they had to do some writing. So they incorporated writing and my monthly payments for this house, my mortgage and they figured out how many miles I had to commute to work and my husband had to commute to work. Like they had it all to a T and they actually figured out where I should live. I ended up buying one of the houses that, not the exact house, but very near to the house that one of my students actually wrote about. And,
Nice.
it was a persuasive writing that they had to write with it. So they really and I can't replicate it because I haven't been buying a house, but, we've tried to do it with like, oh, is somebody buying a car? Is somebody doing this? And we do like the research behind it. And it's a juicy task and it's engaging, but you can incorporate so many other content areas into the mathematics while still having that parent involvement. So that's one of my favorite stories to tell of one of my successful lessons.
So I loved reading about this parent involvement chapter, and I was wondering if people who read this book and maybe haven't yet done parent involvement, how would one go about starting that?
I can share.
Engagement.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, and Karen, no,
Sorry,
I was just saying parent engagement.
Yes.
and I was gonna say Carolee is the one to tell us about this because she has done this so well. I love the Lawndale example.
That we say involvement often, but involvement usually means the one-way approach. That what can the parent do for the school? And so, with the teachers that I first started to work with, what they did is, I shout out to Miss Jean Pryor. I'm sure she's not on this call, but she taught me a lot in all of this as we engaged in it together. That when she was looking at her students and how well they were performing, she was noticing different ethnic groups tended to perform at disparate levels. And she did not take that as something that was a given. She's like, what can I do about this? She started tutoring workshops. And then she's like, I think that parents are the next step. So literally she started with 4 parent engagement workshops for the whole year. She's like, I'll do one like every other month and see what happens. And this was her structure. Parents would come in And they would engage in a mathematical warm-up, something we would call a juicy task that kids were working on over the week to get a sense of what problem solving looked like. She would do a few mini lessons around some of the mathematical activities that the kids would be engaged in over the next 2 to 3 weeks within that unit. Then parents would look at some sample assessment questions and some vocabulary. Jean Pryor's students were performing, they had a 94% average on their district assessment data after that. We had a very high percentage of parents who would come, whether it was 1 time, 2 times, 4 times. You know, I would go out to support her. Sometimes families wouldn't know who I was. And, you know, it's just so beautiful to see like parents come in and she's like, are you here for the math workshop? I don't know why all teachers don't do this. I've been looking forward to it all week. In fact, my daughter called me today and said, Mommy, don't forget your notebook and your pencil because you need those things to do math. And, you know, so this really kickstarted for us. I forgot to mention that prior to coming to Cal State Channel Islands, I was the director of the UCLA Math Project and the UCLA Parent Project. So we got to bring the teacher professional development together with the community engagement workshops. A lot of teachers started to do that. And they noticed such difference in the relationships between the families and the communities. A lot of times this would span out to other teachers within the math department or across other disciplines because we were doing this across K through 12. And so I would say start small, just do 1. Like it doesn't have to be 20. In that one that I did, it was 20 because the parents designed it. This is what they wanted. But you could start with 1 or 2 for the year just to get that started and do it with somebody. You know, a lot of times, like I would work with schools to say, hey, we could do a kickoff in the cafeteria with everyone, but then we could have stations for the families to go to. So then teachers only have to plan a 15 to 20 minute lesson, and then parents can go to, say, 3 different workshops that night. So pick your people that you might want to collaborate with and start small, because once you see the beauty of what happens, chances are you're going to want to do some more. And if Jean Pryor were here, she would say the effort that I put into this was minimal compared to what I got out of it. You know, I think it really starts to change the family home communication and, you know, who is successful at math, you know, because a lot of times I find my parents who went to school in other countries have some beautiful ways of doing math, but they're so convinced that they're not supposed to help their child in that way because it's not going to be valued at school. So, you know, we start to break down those barriers.
Just recently, last school year, when we were still meeting in person, I went and presented a lesson for, you know, an engagement lesson for the parents at an ELAC meeting. And from that ELAC meeting, the parents were in awe of what we were doing in the classroom and they wanted more. So it was this 15, 20-minute activity turned into, hey, can you do this again in an after-school workshop? And that's how we got our foot in the door with parents, because then they went and told other parents, you know, that weren't at that meeting. So to start a workshop, an engagement workshop, it just takes a couple of parents. At that ELAC meeting, I think there was like 15 people. And then at my engagement workshop that I did for math, there was about 40. So it went really fast. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, the English Language Advisory Committee, they meet every month at the schools. So that's a way to get your foot in the door.
So as I'm listening to you, I feel like when I read the book that there seem to be parent involvement sessions with children, but there seems to be some without. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's appropriate with and without?
I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I wanted to ask Carolee if she could share a little bit. It's in the book, but maybe share a little bit more about the work in Lawndale. So often we hear some, you know, teachers or administrators might say, well, we invite parents, but they don't come, right? Or there's assumptions made about why that is. And what happened in this one community is I think it was the administrator, right, noticed that there were parents coming to the school in the evenings. They were coming for a fitness class, like a Zumba class, was it? So what happened from that, Carolee?
So, I think a lot of times when people ask what should they do, I think it's about finding out what parents are interested in and when they're willing to come to school. So, we noticed at this particular school that parents were coming to Zumba. So we thought, why not have the parent workshop right after that? They could come get some healthy snacks, and we could make the math about the healthy living that they were engaged in already as a community. And it wasn't us trying to teach them how to live healthier or to eat healthier. It was really about connecting in with what the parents were interested in. So, a lot of times, like I might say, ooh, let's offer this workshop either right before or right after when parents are going to be at school, whether it's like a child play or, other things that parents come to. Well, after we did that, we were in every elementary school in the Lawndale Elementary School District. Shout out to all my math coaches over there. We got to collaborate for about 3 years and offer 6 to 8 workshops per school. And what was really nice about that is we tailored them to what the teachers and the parents were interested in. So for some workshops, it was parents only because they wanted to be able to engage without their kids so that when they went home, they felt better prepared. For some, it was completely parents and kids together. A lot of times those were STEM focused and engineering design challenges and, doing math together. And sometimes we had a hybrid. So in Lawndale, we have a lot of kids who would be in the after school program. And so we would start about 45 minutes before the after school program got out, and we would do some workshops with the parents. And then there would be a short break, and then they would go and get their kids from the after school program. We offered childcare for the parents whose kids weren't in the after school program. But then for the second hour of that 2-hour block, then we got to engage together, and the parents were really leading the kinds of learning activities that we had done together. So I think there's no one answer for that. It's about thinking about what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve, and what do you think your parents and teachers would be interested in engaging in.
I love that example, Carolee, that you had the parents go through some activities first, just with the parents, and then the students came in, and the parent actually could help facilitate the activity, because I think that makes the parent feel like they're more up with what's happening in the classrooms, whereas because of the shifts have been so dramatic in what math learning is really about, between the time many parents were in school and what's happening now, I think often parents feel frustrated and feel left out. So it's a really powerful way to put them back into that equation, if I could say that, and help them feel back in the role of the parent and having something to contribute to that. And I want to point out on page 103, there's this nice, I don't know if you can see it, there's this nice table that's in the book that talks about the shift in the role of the parent, particularly during homework time. But I think it's appropriate in this kind of math night activity as well, that it's less about being controlling and checking their answers, which is a more traditional way of thinking about, oh, a kid comes home, I'm going to check their work. But it's now more elaborative. Help this child elicit their thinking, help them to clarify what they're talking about, and it reduces the anxiety and the tension around homework.
So I'm a parent of 3 children myself, and I know what that tension looks like with homework sometimes. And I think a big part of the goals that we have in these family engagement workshops is to bring the joy back to the relationship between the child and the parent around doing math together. And so, a lot of times when they come to these workshops, they'll leave with all the materials they need. So if we're doing counting collections, they might engage in counting collections and then go into a classroom and see how this works with children. And then they go home, they make their own counting collections right there with us, and they take those home and they're able to do that. I think any way that we can minimize the amount of things that they have to get to do these kinds of things at home is great. If we're playing math games with cards and dice, we send it home. Amazon has great deals on bulk cards and dice. You can do this for less than $1 a family, so it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. And, it's really about having fun with your child instead of looking over them and, feeling like it's this struggle of homework or family time.
I really appreciate that, you saying that, because I also am a mother of 3, and I know the struggle. The struggle is real when it comes to homework. And that's something that we did want to bring in when we were doing our engagement nights, is having the whole family come together and having fun with math, right? Not like you're saying, not having it be a chore that you're looking over them, but when we invited the families, it broke down some barriers too for them to attend, because if you invited the whole family, then they didn't have to deal with childcare. They didn't have to figure out, what is my child supposed to do while I'm here, or do I have to pay someone? And many times we would have snacks and things like that, just to entice the families to come in the first place, because we know sometimes when there's food, people would come. So it's just another way of breaking down those barriers or those excuses for them to be able to come to these meetings. And so, and having them be fun, it was a plus. So once they came once, they're like, okay, this is fun, I'll come next time, because you've already kind of, and then they spread the word. They say, it was really fun, I was able to bring my kids, and they these communities, they all talk to each other as they're waiting for their, pick up their kids after school or whatever it is. They all talk to each other, and so the next night we would even have more families join us. So I think having the whole family come it's has so many positives.
And if you do want parents on their own, I found that sometimes the best time to have a workshop is right when they bring their kids to school. So school starts at 8:15. Start your parent workshop at 8:30 and have some breakfast, and you'll get a lot of parents to join you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing that came out from a lot of the teachers who are doing this work with family engagement is that when they get the families together and they have a chance to see their student in a different light, right? They can be an observer of interactions among the parent and the child, or the child and their siblings, right? And it actually gives them a lot more insight into how to support that child's learning. Because it's no longer just a solitary, here's a kid in my classroom, during the day. Here's now the same child with their family group, with the community, and you often see a richer picture of their personality, their interests, the way they interact within the family.
I will say too, I've learned more from the parents than probably they've learned from us. I think that there's a lot of great parenting and a lot of great strategies and ideas that maybe have gone overlooked. And at the same time, many parents, I think, start to find their voice in the educational system when they're a part of these workshops. They start to understand what Common Core looks like and why we're engaging differently, and being able to ask questions if their students aren't getting those kinds of experiences. Watch out, they might start advocating, but advocating in a way that the schools are starting to listen to them too.
So I just want to add that I also have 3 children. This is a fun club, and homework, even if one is a math educator, is a struggle. As I was listening and reading, I was questioning myself whether any of you could imagine a world where you would not engage parents and what that would look like.
I mean, that would be a sad world, right? We're supposed to be partners in education. The parents are the child's first educator, and not drawing on those experiences is pretty disheartening, I think. I've always been a strong advocate. Right now, I think it's tough for things to happen in this environment, but I think there's still ways that we can engage parents, even through distance learning. Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine not working with parents.
For me, there's no going back. I know Susan Empson said that, when someone asked her about CGI and starting to listen to children's thinking, that, once you see the beauties of that happen, there's no going back. And I would say it's the same thing for me with family and community engagement, because why does school have to be so separate from the lived experiences of our children and their families? I think we need to start to blur the lines a little bit and stop, putting everything separate in these different boxes.
That was one piece that I was thinking about. I was actually hoping you would say no to my question, so thank you. As I was reading through this chapter, I was imagining, how often school mathematics is this separate entity from anything else, and kids cannot envision using it in their life, and how potentially the stories that I read in the chapter, it seemed like it meshes so well that that separation goes away a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for me, they even made me purchase a house near the school.
Yeah.
So to eliminate a commute. I mean, math is all around us, and we can't separate it. I like, even right now, just Black Friday just happened, or Cyber Week, or there's so much math everywhere. There's no way to separate it. You can just, whatever you're thinking, if you're going by your book or your curriculum, there's or your standards, there's always something that you can attach it to that is real world, culturally responsive. It one of their parents is doing something or other. You're teaching volume. Somebody's delivering boxes every day to your house. How do they stack them in a truck? And everything around you is math. So I don't think you can separate it.
So working in South LA, when we first started at a particular middle school, we had 2 parents come to the math workshops. And then it was 4. And I was like, well, what do? We need to do something differently. So we had a game night, and then we thought, well, why can't we cook together? So they came and we cooked. We had these different stations where they would cook around the world. So they would read a story from Africa and then create the entree. And then they would go to Hawaii and make the salad. And, by the time they went through all of the stations, they've done math, because they were looking at fractions and recipes, and they were creating that together. And then we got to eat together. I think there's something beautiful about breaking bread. And then fast forward a few more workshops after that, we were about to go into 10th grade, and with the bringing on of 10th grade comes chemistry. So I thought, why can't we have take care of yourself night? So we created bath bombs, lip balms, and fragrances, but we used ratios and proportions, algebra, and a little bit of chemistry to do that. And all of the children and their families walked away with some self-care things right before Mother's Day. And this was something they were super excited about. I don't think they'll ever forget. And they were doing math and science to do that. We had 115 people that night. So we went from 2 to 115 by thinking about culturally responsive ways and different kinds of activities to bring the math and science into the learning.
Those are amazing ideas. I want to steal those from you, Carolee.
Hey, contact me anytime. I'm happy to continue thinking about it and resurrect them.
You guys need to publish a follow-up book with all of these ideas in there.
I'm thinking about that right now, actually. So thank you for the vote of confidence.
So I want to transition us a little bit, because we only have about 20 minutes left. And part of what we read for today is kind of the putting it all together. And so I went back and looked at the title of chapter 1 was the physical and virtual environment. And then chapter 2 was discourse-rich environment. Then the task-rich environment with the juicy tasks, which still makes me giggle when I hear that. The assessment-rich environment, and then the families and communities. And then the last chapter is like bringing it all together. And you share several teacher examples in there of how to bring the pieces together. And the three principles that you have in there is teaching towards understanding of powerful math. And I know the first time we met, I asked about powerful math. And we talked a little bit about that. And it seems to me, after reading through this and reflecting on the own course that I just finished teaching, is that the understanding and explaining the math is the math, where my students often think, oh, I know the math, I just can't explain it. And I'm like, yeah, that's not different. But I think that reading through this book has helped me put some of that together. And then viewing students, and I would like broaden this to parents as well, right? Viewing students and parents as sense makers, and then nurture the community. So those were those principles that you kind of pulled together with those 5 things you isolated to write chapters about. So I was just wondering if you want to reflect back on some of that and talk potentially a little bit. I mean, this book is not brand new. So what has happened since the book? Those kinds of things.
Mark, you want to go first?
Sure. Reflecting on the 5 elements and how they come together, I think it was something that we were observing throughout the time we were spending in all these different classrooms. We were noticing it's really hard to isolate one completely from the others, right? There's so much interaction among these different elements. So sort of separating them out was more for the purpose of helping someone focus at one point on one of them at a time. But knowing when you start to put things into practice, as you're creating that physical environment, you're going to be drawing on these other elements as well, right? They naturally come together when you're making these shifts. So it's really something to give the teacher the opportunity to not feel completely overwhelmed, right? I can focus on this one thing at a time, but if you really go deep with thinking about how you structure the physical environment to support these 3 characteristics of powerful math classrooms, you're going to naturally start drawing in on discourse strategies, on the tasks you use, because you set up your classroom to have workstations, to have multiple forms of interaction, to have hands-on materials, to have student engagement, right? Well, then naturally you're going to start thinking about the rest of the elements. I wanted to share, as I was rereading the chapter, the last chapter, there was a section on page 116 where there were comments from students about their learning environment. And if I could, just read this one from Lilia in Senora Jones's 3rd grade class. So this was a dual language, dual immersion classroom. She says, this is a 3rd grade student writing this. What I like about math is that there are lots of strategies you can use. It's not just 1 + 1 is 2. It's like you can do so many strategies. Learning math is really fun. It's not boring. It's because there's so many things we learn. It's not like here's a sheet of paper for you just to do. My teacher doesn't make us do something once and say, now you've learned math. It's like we keep working on it. Talking about math, writing it down helps us learn. We do talk to a partner, but we also talk to everyone else in the class. We didn't do that in my other grades. Before, we just talked to a partner, but now we get to share our ideas with everyone. That helps because then people add on to your ideas to make it easier for me to get it. And I say, oh yeah, now I get this strategy. I love that as a 3rd grader being able to articulate that about her learning in this powerful environment, just to me summarizes it really well. That's what we want, right? This is what we want happening. This is why we visited these teachers, Mayra and her peers. Why we went to their classrooms, because we knew things were happening that were important to document and to share out.
And if I can add a little bit to what Lilia said in 3rd grade, I kind of felt the same level of enjoyment of math, because when I went to school, we just learned the algorithm, we just learned the algorithm, and I'm sure that's the case. And when I started teaching, that's all I knew, right? And so there's this progression as a teacher that you're going to have a learning curve, learning these new strategies. So I learned a lot from Dr. Ellis. He would do these juicy tasks with us, and I would struggle, right? There's this productive struggle that we as teachers would go through, and living it, I think, made me appreciate it more, so that when I went to my classroom, I really understand why the kids had to go through it. So not only did I grow as a teacher, you're saying like, where are you now? I feel, like I've come a long way since my 1st year, 2nd year, 3rd grade, 3rd year teaching. Like now 15 years into teaching, I finally feel like I can be a good math teacher because I've gone through that same productive struggle myself in learning these new, Common Core ways of doing math, because that is not how we learned back in the day. So I feel like there's no way of going back for me. Like, this is how I teach, and this is how I now, as a teacher of teachers, now I'm empowering other teachers. This is what I want them to go through. I want them to go through that productive struggle so they understand why math needs to be taught this way, but also bringing in those families and engaging them in the way that I know works, and that makes a difference for kids and for families, in terms of math and science and any content area. Engaging families is really important.
And I know you're a mathematician, so I hope that I'm not saying this incorrectly, but one of the things that I really hope through all of this is that our students and our parents start to see what the work of mathematicians really look like. I think so often when you ask kids what math is about, if they haven't had these kinds of experiences, it's all about memorization, replication, and worksheets. And this is not the ways in which mathematicians engage in the world. So I'm hoping through these family engagement workshops and the use of juicy tasks and the other ideas that we have in the book, that we're starting to model for our children and their families what it looks like to be a mathematician, where they see themselves as mathematicians.
This actually opens a question I'm very interested in. So if you had an ideal world, what would a student say mathematicians do?
I think we could learn from Lilia.
So talk to each other, build on each other, those kinds of things.
They struggle, right? They play with numbers, they play with ideas.
I think math is about understanding the world and possibly, doing something to change it. So often, as I was a high school math teacher before leaving the classroom, and I had so many students who would say, "Why am I ever going to need this? Like, this is so disconnected from my life." And to engage with our families, we see that they're doing math every day. Some of them realize it, sometimes they don't. But to be able to see that math can be connected to what we value in the world and how we see the world.
Just a little like backstory. My dad is a construction worker all his life. He's retired now. He's 80, but he only had like a 4th grade education. Yet he can build you a house. He knows angles. He is one of the most creative people and best mathematicians that I know. And sometimes the things he does, I can't even explain. I'm like, how did you know how to cut that there? And how did you know how to measure? It's just, I can't even explain it, the things he can do. And yet he only had a 4th grade education in Mexico. And so like when you're asking like, what is a mathematician? A mathematician can be anybody. It can be everyone, right? Everyone's a mathematician. And so mathematician looks different than, somebody that's calculating, force and this and that. It's different from somebody calculating, how to cut a piece of wood. But, a mathematician is everyone. It's you, it's me, it's the kids. Everybody's doing math all the time. And I think they need to recognize that. Like Carolee said, sometimes they don't know it. The math is all around them. So it's up to us to point it out and see the math that, and show the math that is around them by bringing those relevant experiences, not just the stuff in the book, but really bringing it to life in our lessons.
Yeah, I love that example, Mayra, and I think it reminds us that part of this work is really making math, like giving ownership back, right, to the everyday folks who use math all the time, right? Not making this exclusive. Oh, it lives on the pages of a textbook or in the head of the math professor, right? We're all mathematicians, and we want students to feel that, and parents to feel that they're part of that world, and it's part of their world, right? That they can, it's something they use, they can use and do use on an everyday basis. I think that's really what we're after, rather than this unfortunate outcome of traditional ways of teaching mathematics as some sort of isolated subject that's a bunch of manipulations of symbols that becomes compartmentalized in your mind, like, oh, that was school math. Yeah, I don't use that anymore. I finished that 20 years ago. But then you see the same person doing some fabulous geometric transformations in what they're doing in their everyday life, but they don't associate those, right? Because the school math was something they weren't valued. The way they thought, the way they engaged, their identities didn't become part of it. So for me, what's most powerful and what we're after is to have math become part of their identity, for them to realize it is part of their identity, and for them to see themselves in mathematics. It's kind of like Rochelle Gutierrez's her doors and windows metaphor, right? That there's this big expanse of mathematics that they can go into. There's also all kinds of mathematics that they can see themselves as part of who they are.
And isn't it beautiful when they're doing math because they love it and not because we just assigned a worksheet for them to do? When the student thinking still continues, when they come back the next day, Miss Hurtado, I thought about another way to make 152. I'm like, awesome. Let's add that to, our continual thinking about that. So that was what I wanted to add to what Mark said.
So one thing I also wanted to follow up on, Mayra, is something you said. I'm going to butcher the paraphrasing, but you said something like you've been teaching for 15 years and now you feel like you're ready to be a better teacher because you've gone through all the struggle. And I just want to build on that because I feel like I have been teaching for even longer than that. And I'm still learning every single time I teach. So I feel like I'm building my capacity as I go on. And that just happened this year, that I saw a strategy in a course that I've taught a million times, no exaggeration here, that blew me away. I was like, what is this? Where is this coming from? How? And it took me forever to figure it out, but it was a cool strategy. So, I feel like we always learn, right?
Yeah, and I guess I want to clarify what I said. It wasn't until I went through this, we were doing a grant, right? And so when we started this process is when I finally understood, like, wow, I've been doing it wrong. When you finally realize you've been doing something wrong. And as a teacher, you're like, oh my gosh, I could have been doing so much better had I known this one thing. But I feel, yes, just like you said, I learn every day. I learn from parents. I learn from teachers, from colleagues, from kids kids teach me things every day, and sometimes I'm like, we're just gonna do your strategy because it's better than mine, you know, because wow, I didn't even think about it that way. And those are the experiences that I think I love having in my classroom, is when the kids teach me something new. And sure, we're all learning all the time, and I love those experiences.
So we have 5 minutes, and I was wondering if you guys have a favorite story about something you learned from a parent, or something to share for us to close out, or from a child, or from, you know, one of your collaborators.
I think I'll speak more globally. I just really appreciate it. I think there were 23 educators that we got to really work with over the course of a few years. I also position myself to learn something every day. So, you know, every day I go home from one of these classrooms or parent workshops, my husband would be like, okay, I know you're excited to tell me something you learned today. And it absolutely was. Like, I think I'm a better educator because I get to work with so many different teachers and parents and students. And, you know, I think the examples that we shared, some of the highlights for me was, you know, talking to Lilia and talking to third graders and getting on the floor and talking to kids and, you know, seeing the transformation that comes from positioning not just students and parents as knowledgeable contributors, but teachers. You know, we can learn a lot from them. You know, it's not that they have to follow, you know, some specified way of teaching. There's so many different ways that the educators that we got to work with do that. And so that was the beauty for me.
One of the things that I really cherish about when we were doing this project was the camaraderie and the relationship building that was developed, not only with my colleagues at the school at Price Elementary, but also with the connections that we made at the college level, you know, just all the professionals, how we learned from each other. So I feel that through the process of learning and learning together, it just makes it such a, you know, more beautiful experience. And even with the families that we engaged with, it was the relationship building that really stands out, even, you know, years after we, you know, I've since moved out of that district, and I'm in a different district, but I still have those relationships, you know, and that's something you can't take away, because when you're working so closely, engaging in this work, those things are lasting. The relationships are lasting for sure.
I guess for me, I'll kind of share like a big picture in my mind of this work, which is ongoing. Is that, you know, when we, you know, being at a university, I have the privilege to work with teachers like Mayra and her colleagues. When we engage in this work and we provide opportunities for the teachers to really see their own ability to make sense of mathematics and to experience it, as Mayra was saying, in a way different from when they were, you know, in an elementary classroom, right? When they were in school, and to realize the richness of it and the connections to their own lives, to what they do every day. And then seeing them take that and go into classrooms and just transform the learning environment in the ways that we describe in this book, it changes the trajectory of their students in terms of not just mathematics, but just their own thinking about where they might go with the future. You know, sadly, in our society, at least, you know, historically, traditionally, right, mathematics has been a gatekeeper. You didn't do well in math, you're not going to get past this barrier. And that may be into STEM professions, sometimes even into college, right? You can't get past this barrier. You're just not, you know, you're not valued. And it helps students to build that confidence and to see themselves as doers of mathematics and to realize that they have that potential to achieve whatever they set their mind to. And to me, that's the real power of this work. I remember one parent, and Mayra, you may recall this. We in the project she was mentioning that we did with parents in Anaheim. We partnered with a local science center, and they allowed us to use their facility in the evening to have some events, family engagement events. And one of these, there was a professor talking about her own work as a physicist, maybe. I can't remember exactly who, or maybe one of the mathematicians who himself grew up in Mexico and came to the United States and talked about, his own struggles through college and where he is now as a professor. We had a parent come up afterward, and she was speaking in español con Mayra y otros, and saying, I really appreciate this event. I didn't know about these other careers, when I grew up, these weren't things in my experience. And now I'm dreaming so much bigger about what my daughter's going to do. I mean, it just was so powerful. So that's what it is. It's changing trajectories. It's opening possibilities. It's giving those kinds of experiences to our learners because they deserve it. They're our future.
Yes, I do remember that story. Yes. And we had many parents say the same thing. Like, we never knew there was other careers in math. What? That's a math career you can go into? It was very eye-opening for parents. Definitely.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and thank you to all the authors for talking to us about this book. And I think there's gonna be a math teaching podcast episode coming up that's gonna wrap up this. I'm gonna let Joel organize that. But thank you to the three of you for joining us, and thank you for everybody who was watching.
Thanks so much.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Shout out to Cathery. Thank you.
Yes, hi, Cathery.
Hi,
We miss you.